Let me invite you to sit down for just a few quiet minutes. No rush, no need to do anything. Just sit like we're sharing a cup of tea on a breezy afternoon, saying nothing, but truly being here. I know you've probably been through more than you've ever spoken aloud. Maybe someone betrayed your trust. Maybe someone hurt you so deeply that even now, just remembering it makes your chest tighten. And perhaps you've asked yourself, how could I ever forgive them? What they did was too much, too unfair. I've heard that question many times, from fellow monks, from elderly practitioners, from younger folks still carrying the weight of old wounds. And here's what I want to say to you, from the heart. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a gift you give your own heart. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law." Compassion isn't weakness. It isn't saying what happened was okay. It's an inner strength, one that refuses to let someone else's harm define your peace. I remember a woman in her 60s who attended a fall retreat I led in Northern America. She hadn't spoken to her younger sister in nearly 20 years. Just one misunderstanding after their parents passed in silence ever since. For years, she believed she was punishing her sister with that silence. What she didn't realize was that she had built her own prison brick by brick with resentment. She had a lovely home, grandchildren, a secure retirement, but she didn't feel light or joyful. I asked her gently, "If you could put this burden down, what do you think your heart would feel like?" She didn't speak. Then she cried, not because of her sister, but because she suddenly saw how long she'd been holding herself hostage. You see, forgiveness isn't about whether they deserve it. It's about whether you deserve peace. That's what the Buddha meant when he spoke of letting go of hatred as one lays down a heavy load. Now, I understand you might be thinking, "But you don't know my story, Venerable. It hurt too much. It's not that simple." And I don't deny that. But let me offer a new way to see it. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you choose not to let it continue hurting you. It's walking away from the storm not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough not to throw more fire into it. Holding on to resentment is like holding a hot coal, waiting to throw it at someone. But the first one who gets burned is always you. I've seen people completely transform when they learn to forgive. One elderly man lost everything after being betrayed by a close friend. But through quiet meditation, not revenge, he found peace not because he got justice in the world, but because he found justice in his own heart. He realized that friend acted from ignorance and suffering just like so many of us do. And when your heart understands that not just your mind, a strange thing happens. Your pain softens. Not because you're weak, but because you've grown bigger than the pain. In its deepest meaning, compassion is the ability to look at another person and understand, not approve, not excuse, just understand. And forgiveness is what you do for your own healing. Sometimes, it's the only thing that can reach a wound that time alone cannot touch. If there's someone you're still holding in your heart today, a name, a face, a story that hasn't found closure, I'm not asking you to forgive them right now. But I do invite you to begin with a little compassion. Compassion for your pain, and compassion for the one who caused it, because they may also be suffering in ways they don't even know how to heal. The Buddha said, "When the mind is cleansed of anger, it becomes still like a calm lake reflecting the moon and stars. And it's in that stillness that peace begins to return, not because someone else has changed, not because life has fixed itself, but because you came back to yourself with a heart that finally let go." I'm not telling you this to preach. I'm telling you As someone who's been there, I've been hurt, I've been angry, I've carried weight I didn't know how to put down, but I chose forgiveness. And I know now that peace is worth everything. So if something I said today has stirred something in your heart, please don't scroll away just yet. Sit here a little longer. With me. With yourself. Because maybe, just maybe, this moment is the beginning of your own letting go. The first step back to a lighter heart and a deeper, more peaceful life. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is turning its back on us. The things we don't want keep happening, and the things we've been waiting for never seem to arrive. We find ourselves confused, disappointed, even angry at life itself. But here's something I've come to learn through Buddhist teachings, something both simple and profound. It's not our circumstances that cause us pain. It's how we see those circumstances. I once sat with a man in his early 50s. He had been a highly successful businessman. But one day, he lost everything: his company, his wealth, his reputation. When he came to see me, all he had left were tired eyes and a question he could barely get out. Why did this happen to me? I didn't respond with theories or philosophy. I just gently asked, what if this didn't happen to you, but happened for you? He looked at me, startled. Then we sat in silence, a long, still silence. And in that space, I watched something shift in him. A deeper kind of question was forming. As if, for the first time, he was looking at himself not to blame, but to understand. The Buddha once taught, the mind is the forerunner of all things. It leads, it creates. If we act or speak with a defiled mind, suffering will follow us like the cart behind the ox. But if we act or speak with a pure mind, happiness will follow us like a shadow that never leaves. In other words, the way we think is the way we live. Have you ever watched a storm from afar? When you're inside it, it's chaos, wind, noise, fear. But when you step back, maybe stand somewhere higher, you see the shape of the storm, the direction it's going, and you realize it will pass. The mind is no different. When we're caught in negative thoughts, in habitual reactions, all we can see is suffering. But if we learn to pause, to take a step back, to look at our situation through a softer lens without judgment, without attachment, our minds begin to quiet down. A true student of the Dharma doesn't just ask, what's happening to me? They ask, what am I thinking right now? Why am I reacting this way? Is there another way to see this? I once led a meditation group for seniors in California. One woman in her 70s shared that she often felt neglected by her children. She felt hurt, angry sometimes, even wanted to cut them off completely. But after a few sessions of sitting quietly and watching her thoughts, she came to me with tears in her eyes and said, maybe it's not that they don't love me. Maybe I've just been expecting them to love me in the way I wanted. Her words left the whole room silent. You see, when we shift our perspective, the truth also changes shape. Not because the world changed, but because our mind became still enough to see more clearly. The Buddha never taught us how to avoid suffering. He taught us how to look into it deeply, to understand its roots. And often, one of the biggest roots is our own way of thinking. The stubborn habitual patterns that make us react instead of observe. But once we realize that we have the power to choose a new thought, a new perspective, we stop being victims of fate and start becoming co-creators of our life experience. I won't pretend it's easy, but it is possible. Day by day, moment by moment, you can begin to look at your challenges in a new light. Stop asking, why me? and start asking, what is this trying to teach me? This way of thinking doesn't excuse the pain, but it does help you reclaim your power. It gives you your center back. I truly believe that when someone begins to shift the way they think, it's like a door opens inside them, a door that leads inward to a peace that isn't based on everything going right, but on how we choose to face things, even when they go wrong. If you're going through a hard season in your life, I don't have a perfect answer for you, but I do have an invitation. Try looking again, not with the old eyes, but with the eyes of someone who's learning, someone who wants to grow from the inside out. Because as the Buddha taught, we are not bound by what happens around us. We are bound by the ignorance and attachments in our own minds. And in that very same place, we can also find our freedom. Freedom sometimes is as simple as learning to see differently. And once that shift happens, a quiet peace begins to return. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The human mind is like a lake. When the weather is calm, the water is still, but even the lightest breeze can ripple its surface. And when a storm hits, if the lake isn't deep enough, steady enough, it breaks into chaos. To hold a steady mind in a world full of change isn't just a virtue for monks. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to live in peace. Over the years, I've met many people during some of the hardest seasons of their lives. Losing a loved one, facing illness, divorce, or simply waking up one day feeling lost when everything they thought was certain shifted. And they ask me, how do I keep from falling apart? I never offer magic formulas, but I often share this image. A pine tree growing at the top of a mountain. It's not a soft, flexible tree. It doesn't avoid the wind. It stands there season after season facing sun, snow, and the harshest winter storms. And it doesn't break. Why? Because its roots run deep, and the human heart is the same. When our roots are deep, the storm outside cannot shake us. The Buddha once said, "One who remains unmoved by praise or blame, gain or loss, joy or sorrow, that one has found true peace." This doesn't mean they no longer feel. It means they no longer get lost in what they feel. I once met an older woman after her husband passed away. They'd been together nearly 40 years. Now, she had to learn how to live alone. She said to me, "Venerable, I just feel hollow, like I have nothing to hold on to." I didn't tell her to forget. I didn't say her grief would pass quickly. I simply guided her to sit still each day, even just for a few minutes. Place a hand over her heart and breathe deeply. At first, she said the silence was unbearable. But later, she came back and said, "Sometimes I don't feel so empty anymore. I feel like I'm coming home, not back to the past, but back to myself." That's stability. That's standing your ground. That's finding a center inside, a place that doesn't get swept away by what's happening around you. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, like a solid rock that is not shaken by the wind, so the wise remain unshaken by praise or blame. He didn't say, the monk. He said, the wise, which means anyone with awareness can live this way. The truth is, inner stability doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from everything going your way or people treating you well. It comes from spiritual discipline, from coming back to care for your inner life every day. Meditation, mindfulness, reflection, study. These are the things that build a spine for your soul, a center line for your mind. I once lived in a mountain monastery where we meditated each morning in the cold, under the sound of birds in the forest. One day, a powerful storm rolled in trees, bent and broke under the wind. But in the meditation hall, no one moved. Not because we didn't hear the storm, but because we understood the wind is outside. Whether it enters our minds, that's our choice. And so it is for you. You may not be able to control what life brings your way, but you can choose whether or not you let it carry away your peace. When others are angry, you can stay calm. When your career takes a hit, you can trust in the unfolding. When someone you love walks away, you can still choose to stay kind instead of falling into despair. Stability of mind isn't being hard or emotionless. It's deep softness. It's knowing when to hold still and when to step back. It's an art. And as we grow older, it becomes not just helpful but essential. Because the older we get, the more wind we face. And without a place to anchor inside, it's easy to be swept away. So if you're going through a storm right now, please know it's not a sign that you're weak. It's an invitation, a chance to train your mind to hold steady, to remember the only thing you truly have control over is yourself. And when your heart becomes steady enough, you'll be like that pine tree on the mountain. You don't need to run from the wind because you've learned how to stand still in the storm with trust, with mindfulness, with a quiet smile, no reason needed. And that, dear friend, that is freedom. Have you ever just sat quietly and truly asked yourself, how did I live today? I'm not talking about how much you got done, but whether you were really there for the things you did. Did you actually taste the sweetness of your morning tea? Did you hear the birds outside your window? Did you feel the sunlight gently brushing across your hair? I'm not asking these things because I want you to slow down. I'm asking because I want you to live deeper. In Buddhism, happiness doesn't come from what you're doing, but from whether your heart is truly present in what you're doing. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path." I heard that teaching when I was young, but it wasn't until I got older, until I went through real loss, through seasons that nearly broke me, that I began to truly understand it. Happiness is not a destination. It doesn't wait for the moment when everything is finished. When everyone loves us, when life finally settles, happiness begins right here. When we bring our full presence to the moment, and we learn to appreciate what already is. A man in his 60s once came to see me. He had been living alone for quite some time. He said, "Venerable, I have everything I need. I eat well, I have enough, but I feel empty. Each day feels like a copy of the one before." I gently asked him, "This morning, when you had breakfast, did you really taste the food? When you walked outside, did you notice the leaves moving in the breeze?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. "Number, I just wanted to get it over with." And that quiet disconnection is what leaves many people feeling lost in their own lives. Not because they have nothing, but because they drift through their days like a shadow. Mindfulness, or sati in Buddhist teachings, isn't some complicated technique. It's simply the art of being fully alive in the here and now. We often believe that happiness requires a change in circumstances, a new achievement, a different location, a better outcome. But the truth is, if you're not present with yourself right now, then no matter where you go, your heart will still feel empty. I once led a meditation retreat for seniors. After the 5th session, one woman who was known for being a bit sharp said to me, "I've lived over 70 years, but I think this is the first time I've truly heard the sound of my own breath." I smiled, because in that moment, she had stopped running. She was finally living. Every breath, every step, every gentle gaze can be the seed of happiness if we bring mindfulness into it. Each morning, if you can open the window and see the light with gratitude, simply for being alive, then that day is already a gift. A cup of tea, when sipped with presence, can heal a weary heart. A loving word, spoken from a heart that's fully here, can warm a relationship that once felt distant. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "One day lived mindfully is better than 100 years lived without awareness." It's not the length of our life that makes it meaningful, but the depth of each moment we live. And you can start simply. When washing the dishes, just wash. When eating, just eat. When sitting beside someone you love, just sit. No planning, no rushing ahead. Those small things, done with presence, will take you somewhere deep. Somewhere you stop seeking happiness because you realize you're already inside it. And if you've lived long enough to have lost something precious, a loved one, your youth, or even something that once made your heart sing, then you understand, more than most, that every passing moment is irreplaceable. So why let it slip away in regret, in worry, or simply in a life half-lived? Mindfulness won't make your life glamorous, but it will make every ordinary moment feel alive, meaningful, and enough. I don't know where you are in your journey, but I truly believe this. No matter your age, your past, your circumstances, you can always begin again. Not from the beginning, but from right here, from this breath, from this gentle, grateful smile, from this quiet step that says, "I'm here." Because sometimes what makes us happy isn't something new, but learning to live more deeply with the things we already have. And that kind of presence is the deepest joy you'll ever carry with you. There are moments in life when we wish we could go back, rewrite the past, undo the damage. And there are other times when all we want is to escape a reality we never asked for. An illness, a loss, a breakup, or simply a change we didn't want and didn't choose. Over the years, I've sat with many people at those sharp turns in life. They've looked at me and said, "Venerable, I can't accept this. This shouldn't have happened to me." And I understand that feeling. Who among us hasn't felt like life was unfair at some point? Who hasn't wanted to fight back against what people call fate? But through the teachings of the Buddha, I've come to understand something deeply important. Suffering doesn't come from the situation itself, but from our resistance to it. The Buddha taught, whatever is born will die. Whatever comes together will fall apart. Things do not unfold according to our will. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's seeing things clearly, without adding or subtracting, and finally stopping the war we're fighting in our minds. Once, I led a meditation retreat for people who had just gone through life-altering events. One woman shared that she had lost her only son in a tragic accident. She looked at me and said, "I just can't accept it. Life is too cruel." I didn't rush to explain or fix anything. Instead, I shared with her an old Buddhist story about a woman named Kisa Gotami, who also lost her only child and ran everywhere begging the Buddha to bring him back to life. The Buddha didn't turn her away. He simply told her to find a mustard seed from a household that had never known death. She went house to house, but of course, she couldn't find a single one. And when she returned to the Buddha, she broke down crying, not because the pain had disappeared, but because something inside her understood. Death wasn't just her story. It was the nature of life. That story didn't erase the grief in the woman I was speaking to, but it helped her stop fighting reality. She still hurt, but within that pain, something softened. She let go, just a little. And that letting go is where healing begins. In Buddhism, acceptance is a form of wisdom. It's when your heart no longer gets pulled back and forth by the tides of should and shouldn't. It's when you can look at what is without needing it to be what it was. or what you hoped it would be. And strangely, when you stop resisting, the mind becomes very still, like water that finally stops being stirred. It settles on its own, like a clenched hand that finally opens. Even the pain begins to soften. Someone once asked me, "Venerable, if I accept this, am I giving up?" I said no. Giving up is when you lose hope and act from despair. But acceptance is when you act from wisdom, when you see clearly what can change, what cannot, and you choose to live mindfully within those boundaries. I have a student who used to be a bright and active young man. At age 40, he had a stroke and lost movement on one side of his body. For a year, he sank into deep depression. But one day, he came to the monastery in a wheelchair and listened to a Dharma talk in the forest. Afterward, he said to me, "I can't walk like before, but I can still listen, I can still breathe, and I can still love." From that day on, he meditated every morning in his wheelchair, taught online mindfulness classes for people with disabilities, and became one of the most inspiring human beings I've ever known. That's the power of accepting reality. When you stop demanding that life be different, you finally begin to live with what is. The Buddha once said, "Live like a leaf on the river, carried by the current, but not sinking, not clinging." A leaf doesn't choose the water it floats on, but it can choose how it flows, lightly, freely, without struggle. I'm not saying this is easy, but I am saying that anyone can learn it, bit by bit, breath by breath. You start by accepting a rainy day, a change in plans, then maybe a difficult season in your life, a heartbreak, a loss, and finally, the truth of impermanence itself, the ever-changing nature of everything. Because it's only when we stop thrashing against the tide that our heart can truly rest. And in that rest, you may see something beautiful. Life was never punishing you. It was simply teaching you how to stay with yourself more deeply than ever before. I remember one quiet afternoon during a small tea meditation at the monastery. Across from me sat a middle-aged woman, her voice soft and heavy. She said, "Venerable, I don't know why, but I always feel like I'm not enough. I look at my friends, some have happy families, others have successful children. And me? Every morning I wake up to an empty house and a long list of things I still haven't done." I sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked her a simple question. "Have you ever seen a field of wildflowers?" She nodded. I said, "Did you notice no flower blooms exactly like another? Some bloom early, some bloom late. Some are bright and bold, others soft and gentle. But they're all flowers, and they all bloom in their own time." There's something in life that hurts us in a quiet, invisible way. Comparison. Comparing ourselves to others. Comparing the present to some perfect future. Comparing our age to what we should have done by now. And the truth is, the older we get, the easier it becomes to fall into that trap, especially when everyone around us seems like a mirror reflecting what we haven't done yet. But here's something important. The Buddha never taught that happiness comes from being like anyone else. He taught that each person has their own karma, their own path, their own journey to awakening. One who lives with themselves fully is their own safe island. When you understand this, you stop feeling the need to compete. I once had a young monk share with me how discouraged he felt, seeing other monks give better Dharma talks, earning more respect. He said, "I know I shouldn't compare, but deep down, I still feel less than." I didn't scold him. Instead, I told him a short story from the scriptures. One day, the Buddha's disciples asked him, "Master, who among us is the best?" The Buddha smiled and replied, "The best is the one who walks the path using their own true capacity. There is no best, There's only what's most true and fitting. A spoon can't be compared to a lantern, each serves its purpose. And you, too. Your life doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You didn't come here to copy someone's path. You came here to walk your own, deeply, sincerely, no matter how winding, slow, or different it may be. I've met people who spent their whole lives feeling ordinary, until the day they let go of comparison. And in that moment, they began to live authentically, and they began to shine, quietly but beautifully. One man in his 60s once told me, "I spent my whole life trying to be like someone else. It wasn't until I realized I didn't have to that I finally started to live." That's the truth. When we stop comparing, we finally start seeing the beauty unfolding from within us. Like a lotus doesn't try to be a rose. It simply rises from the mud and blooms when its time has come. No applause needed, yet it radiates all the same. In our meditation circles, we often recite a quiet reflection. I am exactly where I need to be. I am living at my own pace. It's not meant to comfort. It's meant to remind us of the truth. You're not late. You're not behind. You're simply moving in rhythm with yourself. And that rhythm is the sacred whisper of the universe, just for you. Letting go of comparison doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you grow in a way that doesn't cost you yourself. You don't need to be the best version of yourself based on someone else's standard. You only need to be the truest, kindest version of you, the one that brings you peace. So if today your heart feels heavy from looking around too much, come back. Place your hand on your chest and ask, "What am I walking toward?" And if the answer isn't love, truth, or inner peace, you might just be chasing someone else's dream. And in the end, dear friend, life doesn't need you to shine like anyone else. It only asks that you bloom in your own way, in your own season. The flower doesn't rush, and neither should you, because everything unfolds when it's ready. And you are slowly becoming exactly who you're meant to be. Not early, not late, right, on time. One thing I've learned over many years of living and practicing, worry never solves the problem. It only makes the mind more tangled. And I believe if you've lived long enough, you've probably realized this too. Worry doesn't make anything better. It just makes your heart heavier, your sleep more restless, and the world around you feel a little darker. I remember a man in his 60s came to one of our tea meditations. He said, "Venerable, I'm in big trouble. I lost my job. My wife is sick, and we're about to lose the house because we can't pay rent. I'm so worried. I'm scared about the future. I'm scared of everything." I listened for a long time. Then I gently asked, "So, what did you do yesterday to change the situation?" He looked at me, a bit embarrassed. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I just worried." I didn't blame him, because I understand many of us are used to sitting inside our worries like a familiar habit. But in Buddhist teachings, worry is not wisdom. Mindful action, that's wisdom. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Live fully in the present moment." And when we truly live in the present, we begin to see things more clearly. And from that clarity, solutions start to appear. I often say that worrying is like staring at a locked door for hours, not realizing there's an open window right beside it. During mindfulness retreats, I always remind people, if there's something you can do, do it. If there's something you can't do, breathe. Because the breath is where awareness begins. And only when the mind is calm can we clearly see the next right step. One practitioner once told me, whenever her family faced a crisis, instead of sitting and worrying, she would start cleaning the house, not to avoid things, but because while doing something concrete, her mind would slowly clear, and often a solution would quietly arise in that stillness. You see, there's no miracle in overthinking, but when we shift from worry to action, the energy changes. Worry makes us feel powerless. Action gives us choices, and choice is the root of hope. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "A person drowning in the ocean should not cry. They should swim." He wasn't telling us to deny our fear. He was inviting us to rise above it through mindfulness and intention. I've seen many people transform their lives, not because they had more resources, but because they chose to focus on what they could do instead of staying stuck in what they couldn't bring. An elderly man I knew once had a stroke and lost the ability to speak properly. But instead of giving up, he learned to write with his left hand. He began journaling, writing poetry, and even teaching children how to write. He told me, "I lost my voice, but I found a new way to speak." And I believe each of us has something like that inside us. The question is, what are you looking at? The problem or the path forward? I'm not saying life isn't hard sometimes, but I believe suffering only becomes paralyzing when we just sit and stare at it like a mountain. But if we begin removing one small stone at a time, we'll start to see even a mountain can be moved bit by bit, day by day. You don't need to see the entire road ahead. You only need to see the next step and take it. Each mindful step is one step out of confusion. And if today you're in a difficult moment, please hear this from my heart. You don't have to fix everything. Just choose one wise thing, something small, and do it with presence and compassion. Because in mindful action, there's already a seed of peace. And from that seed, a way forward will grow. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you've become strong enough to walk through it one step at a time. I once asked an elderly man, not long after he retired from a successful business career, "When you wake up each morning now, what brings you the most joy?" He looked at me for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Back then, I thought the answer was money, traveling, finally doing whatever I wanted. But now, I realize it's the quiet peace of having a cup of tea with no one interrupting me, no need to prove anything. That's the real happiness." I smiled, because I've heard that same answer said in different ways from many people who've climbed the outer ladders of success. You see, we live in a world where happiness is often defined by what we have: a beautiful home, a new car, a luxury vacation, or even other people's admiration. But in Buddhist teachings, happiness doesn't come from what you possess. It comes from how you live within your own heart. The Buddha once said, "Peaceful is the one who lives without greed." Not because wanting things is evil, but because greed never lets us rest. When we believe that just one more thing, a purchase, a relationship, a title, will finally make us happy, we're placing our peace on a shaky chair. And when the chair is wobbly, we never feel safe sitting in it. I once met an older woman who lived in a stunning house filled with every comfort, but her eyes carried a quiet loneliness. She told me, "I have everything, Venerable, but somehow I feel like I have nothing at all." I gently asked her, "Have you ever truly sat still with yourself? No television, no phone, no one around, just you and your breath?" She hesitated, then shook her head. I understood. Because silence, which is the home of inner joy, is something many people fear. Why? Because when we finally sit still, we begin to see how empty we feel inside. But it's in that seeing that an entirely new door begins to open. According to the Buddha, true happiness isn't a fleeting rush of excitement, but a deep inner stability unshaken by outer events. He said, "The foolish seek pleasure in sensual craving. The wise find joy in a quiet mind." This quiet mind doesn't mean cold or emotionless. It simply means not being pushed around by every urge or thought. It's when you can sit on an ordinary day and still feel whole inside. I remember one winter at the monastery. Nothing special happened that day. But that morning, as I stepped out of the meditation hall, I saw sunlight filtering through the branches and the wind brushing my cheek. And I laughed like a child, not because of anything grand, but because I was truly present and I could feel life breathing with me. Moments like that, you can't buy them, and you won't find them if your heart is always reaching outward. Have you noticed? The moments that make you feel truly happy are often the simplest ones. A kind word, a warm hug, a quiet evening breeze, because they touch the deepest part of you, the part that doesn't need to impress anyone, the part that just wants to be. And the beautiful thing is, inner joy doesn't need conditions. It just needs your presence. When you return to your inner world, through the breath, through meditation, through being fully present, you'll see that peace begins to sprout, like a small seed. It grows quietly, but it grows strong. One time, a fellow monk told me something I'll never forget. Outer happiness is like fireworks bright, but gone in a flash. Inner happiness is like the moon, gentle, but always there, whenever we're still enough to look up. And I believe, when you've walked far enough in life, what you're truly searching for isn't some flashy achievement, but a quiet place inside your heart where you can rest, take a deep breath, and smile without needing a reason. That is real happiness. No one gives it to you. No one can take it away. Only you can choose whether to grow it or not. So if today you feel tired from chasing things outside of yourself, I invite you to pause, just for a moment. Breathe. Listen to your own heart and ask yourself, is my mind at peace? Because everything you truly need begins from that peace. And from that stillness, happiness will quietly blossom like a flower that blooms, not for applause, but simply because it's time. There's something I often say to people who come to me in the middle of life's upheavals. Suffering isn't a mistake. It's part of the journey of becoming. And if you're somewhere between your 30s and 70s, I believe you've lived through seasons like that. Times when you're no longer the wide-eyed dreamer you once were, but not entirely at peace either. Times when you realize life isn't always gentle. But the real question isn't whether life has been kind to you. The real question is, have you built the kind of inner strength that lets you remain steady, even when the world around you isn't? The Buddha said, endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines. But to the one who endures, the final victory comes. He didn't teach us to avoid pain. He taught us how to walk through it without losing our compassion, without losing ourselves. I once led a retreat for people who had lost loved ones during the pandemic. One woman in her 50s shared with me that she felt like her entire root system had been pulled up. She was lost, disconnected from life, unsure what to believe in anymore. I didn't tell her to be strong in that empty surface-level way. I just sat beside her. We stayed in silence for a long time. And then I said, "You don't need to force yourself to get over it. You only need to learn how to stay without falling apart. That, to me, is the foundation of inner strength. Not the absence of breakdown, but the quiet power to fall and not be completely shattered. In Buddhism, inner strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you cultivate day by day, breath by breath, in the smallest of moments. Like staying calm when someone insults you. Like taking a deep breath instead of reacting. Like being able to whisper, "It's okay" to yourself in the middle of a sleepless night. You know, true happiness isn't reserved for those who avoid pain. It's the reward for those who've learned to look suffering in the eye and still keep a soft heart. People with real inner strength, they're not the ones who never hurt. They're the ones who know what pain feels like, but still choose to live with beauty. A young student of mine lost a leg in an accident. He fell into deep depression for 2 years. Then one day, I saw him return to the temple with a gentle smile. I asked, "Are you doing better?" He said, "I'm not done being sad, Master, but I'm no longer running from it." From that day on, he began sharing his story with others, not as a victim, but as a companion on the path. And that is true strength. The Buddha once taught, like a raft, we don't cling to suffering, nor do we reject it. We use it to cross the river. I love that image, because it doesn't glorify suffering, and it doesn't deny it either. It simply shows us that if we know how pain can become a tool, a vehicle for growth, a path to deeper understanding, and a way to love others from a more honest place. Inner strength is also built through quiet discipline, meditating in the morning, eating with mindfulness, listening to your body, listening to yourself. These simple things, practiced steadily, become the pillars that hold you upright when the waves begin to rise. I'm not saying you need to be a hardened person. In fact, I believe those with the most inner strength are often the gentlest souls. They don't need to appear strong because they've already found stillness within. They're not swayed by praise or criticism. So if you're walking through a rough season right now, I'm not inviting you to run from it. I'm inviting you to slow down, place your hand over your heart, and breathe. Each breath is a moment of training. Each quiet minute is another brick in your inner foundation. Each day, you make it through with compassion for yourself is a quiet victory. And you'll come to see, you don't have to wait for life to stop being stormy to live in peace. Because you've learned how to walk through the storm without losing the calm inside your chest. And that is the kind of strength no one can ever take from you. I have a small habit I've kept for decades. Every night before I go to sleep, I sit quietly for a few minutes and silently say, "Thank you." It's nothing grand. Sometimes I'm just thankful for a warm meal, a day without pain, a quiet evening sky, a friend who checked in, or simply the fact that I'm still breathing, still alive. And you know what? When we live with gratitude, something shifts. Even the most ordinary moments begin to feel quietly extraordinary. I once told a middle-aged Buddhist practitioner, "You don't need to go searching for miracles in life. Take a closer look. Your very breath is a miracle." He hesitated, then tears filled his eyes. He had recently survived a stroke, barely. And ever since, he told me, each morning he wakes up, he places a hand on his chest and thanks his body. Something he had never done before. The Buddha once said, "Let us rise up and be thankful. For if we didn't learn much today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we did get sick, at least we didn't die. So let us all be thankful." He didn't teach us to be grateful only when life is going well. He taught us to be grateful even when things are imperfect, even in loss. Because gratitude isn't something automatic. It's a conscious, mindful choice. A man in his 60s once told me that after retirement, he felt useless. No more title, no one asking for his opinion. Then one afternoon, he sat on the porch and made his grandchild laugh while telling a fairy tale. And for the first time in years, he felt a simple joy he hadn't touched in a long time. Since that day, he said, I started writing down one thing I'm grateful for every night. Some days, it's just how beautiful the evening shadows looked. Gratitude isn't pretending everything is okay. It's recognizing that even when things aren't okay, there's still something worth cherishing. Many people think they need to have a perfect life before they can feel grateful. But the truth is, it's gratitude that makes life feel more complete. I once lived in a monastery tucked away in the quiet mountains. No electricity, no hot water, but there were many early mornings when the mist hadn't yet lifted that I would see the soft purple sky in the east, and something in my heart would warm up, not because of anything specific, but simply because I was alive. I could see, I could feel, I could breathe. And have you noticed? When you live with gratitude, you stop needing the world to change for you. You complain less. You demand less. You begin to live more deeply with what you already have. A cup of tea, a hand to hold, a pain-free breath, a quiet afternoon, a slow, unhurried day. I often tell my older students, there's no dream more sacred than learning to appreciate the life you're already living. Because every moment you're still here is a gift that will never repeat itself. In Buddhist teachings, gratitude is the foundation of both compassion and wisdom. When we're grateful, we no longer live like someone constantly reaching out to get. We live like someone who has already received. And only those who've received deeply can truly give. So if today you feel like your life is still missing something, I invite you to try this. Write down 3 small things you're grateful for, just for today. They don't need to be big. It could be the sunlight on your porch, the bird singing this morning, a message from someone you haven't heard from in a while, a favorite song that played unexpectedly. And tomorrow, write 3 more. And the next day, again. And slowly you'll begin to see happiness doesn't come from what you're waiting for. It comes from how you see what's already here. Because in the end, as I often remind my students, gratitude doesn't change the world. It changes you. It makes you lighter, softer, and more deeply alive. And if something in this video spoke to your heart, if it made you pause, breathe a little deeper, or remember something important within yourself, I invite you to share your reflection in the comments below. You can share one thing you're grateful for today, a memory that made you smile, or simply a kind hello. And if you'd like to continue walking this path together, learning how to live more simply, more mindfully, and more gratefully, please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds. Share this video with someone you care about. And don't forget to click like so we know you're still here, still breathing, still listening to life with an open heart. Thank you for being here today. And may your day be full in the quiet beauty of all the little things.